Wait on sin, wait on sin. Hello. Thank you for traveling with me these 6 weeks. I am grateful to be of service to you. I am indebted to my teachers, to my unseen, to all of the ancestors, the parteras in our lineage, the birth keepers who brought me here. Thank you. Thank you to all of the birth keepers in your lineage who brought you here. Thank you to all of our honorable, bright, and well ancestors for giving us space to heal our lineages together, to heal birth together, to heal the world together. I ask for gentle hearts, protected hearts. I ask for our ability to conjure our warrior selves now, conjure our healer selves now. I ask for all of those who have gone before us, for the warrior birthers who have died in childbirth, for the warrior ancestor spirit babies who have died coming through the portal. I ask for all their blessings now to help us honor life and death, to help us steward life and death ceremonially as our honorable ancestors once did. I ask that we are able to see clearly our own needs in our own bodies as it pertains to birth, to medicine, to relationships, to politics, to our personal guiding ourselves, our people, our communities. I ask for strength and clarity in our own personal guidance. Thank you for allowing us to do this work. May we walk in beauty. May we walk in the resilience of those who have come before, and may we protect sacred life. All right. So please have water with you. Be willing. This is going to be one straight through shot. We're finishing here with a bang. There are 4 documents that go along with this video. It is heavy. I have chosen to offer generalities. We have been together now for over a month. You have been learning my points of view, my biases in our groups. We've been learning each other's points of view, each other's spirit spaces, each other's ancestral spaces in our unseen realms, and the times, the awakening collectively that has been happening, that is happening, is showing us so much of what we need to know. That said, what I am offering you is a chip on the iceberg, as they say, and I hope that you will look further, study further if you feel the need. What I am giving you to understand is more of a big picture experience from my understanding as a lineage healer, as a seer, as a Chicana raised in a marginalized community, and as a birth worker who's worked in both hospital and home settings in many different cultural settings. So this is how birth work is social justice work. This is protecting life. I will say, please get your spirits on. I ask for our spirits to be protected because the other way of saying that is trigger warning. Okay, we're going to be talking about American history now as it pertains to birth. Okay, Protecting Life by POC American History. Please protect your spirits. Take a moment, whatever you need to do to protect yourself right now. All right. The history of OBGYN, if you didn't know, there are resources in your resource guide. The history of OBGYN begins with a man named J. Marion Sims who practiced his surgeries on unanesthesed slave women. There was a student of his who's also noted in history called Bozeman, who also practiced on unanesthesed slave women. And it is true that in the United States of America, many experimentations went on slaves and also indigenous bodies. The ones on the formerly enslaved are highly documented as medical medicine, as OBGYN became more of a field. Many resources do not honor the women's bodies, the female bodies that these torturous men practiced on, who were also helping them in these surgeries, helping them perform these surgeries, helping them perfect these surgeries, who were also tasked with doing regular slave things as they were recovering from these unanesthesed surgeries, like rearing children, like wet nursing white babies. This is a dark history, and it is part of the reason I do not I do not honor, I don't fuck with OBGYN for these purposes, because energetically it still carries that energy. I would like to say the names of the 3 slave women who are named: Anarcha, Lucy, Betsy. I wish you peace. I wish you healing. I honor your legacy of being warriors. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry. You can look this up further in your resources. There's so many who have suffered at the hands of white men playing God. Okay, so alongside these practices of OBGYN, there's something called what were called the granny midwives, which are basically midwives who were black, who were formerly enslaved humans, who had all of these ancestral teachings from Africa, as well as from indigenous people around, as well as from having their own communities, and post-slavery, who created their own communities. Because basically, if during slavery black bodies were used to experiment on, it's not safe for black bodies. So many black communities, of course, did not trust Western medicine and had their own manners of bringing life into the world. And in the 1940s, thereabouts, around World War II, where they were trying to train a lot of nurses, and there's a long history of this, but basically the creating formal nurses used the knowings of granny midwives to train white nurses in midwifery, and then sabotage or smear campaign granny midwives as well as indigenous midwives, saying like having newspaper campaigns of these like eerie looking witches that where you don't want to birth your baby here, and then the opposite side showing these medicalized pristine settings saying you want to birth your baby here. So a lot of herbalism, etc., were taught, it was taken away, it was thieved from black and indigenous people and given to the current medical industrial complex and the white midwives, the white nurses. So you can look into all of this for yourself. Okay, this is just what I know from different midwives that I've worked with, my bit of research, and my ancestral understanding of what bodies have gone through, specifically bodies of the genocided upon and formerly enslaved that I have worked on. Descendants of the formerly enslaved, and formerly genocided upon. Okay, so there has been sterilization on Indigenous women as well as Black women. You can look that up. It's something that is not old. Um, I know a few people who've been sterilized in this day and age. Not not as insidiously as others in history. Um, but like while they're open on the table, the white doctor's like, I'll just tie your tubes right now. And then they're like young and confused and like, oh, okay, after having just gone through labor, um, or had a baby taken out of their bodies. Um, Also in the 1800s, traditional indigenous ceremonies were outlawed, including birth ceremonies. Traditional pregnancy and birthing practices were outlawed. There is also a history to remember that we're all still healing from, of indigenous boarding schools, of literally having your children taken from you and put in schools and cutting their hair. And again, trigger warning, it's so horrible. Just if you look back at slavery, the way they would just take babies, and you had to, this happened with indigenous people too. Both Black and indigenous women were like indentured servants to feed white babies, at the expense of feeding their own babies. So there is a deep, horrid history of disconnection, of separation, of disassociation. And you're welcome to look into this on your own. So, ongoing systemic racism and oppression, we're going to talk about that in the third document. Currently, Black Americans have the highest maternal and infant death rates. Full-blood indigenous people come in second, then non-white Hispanics. So, by POC, have higher death rates of mothers and infants, of birthers and babies, in hospitals than white people in hospitals. And that is the direct impact of systemic racism. So please educate yourself on the specifics if you'd like. There's so much we can talk about. Okay, so women's medicine taken over by white men when our wombs and births were no longer our own. So this began long ago in pre-witch hunt medieval times, at the beginning of early capitalism. Basically, you can also look this history up. When they wanted to make wage workers, one of the insidious manners in which they separated humans from each other, so that there would be men who went to work to make profit for the then 1%, pre-witch hunt era, was they attacked the birthing community. They attacked women on women. This is where the word gossip comes from. What used to mean godmother, who would offer you support, especially during birthing. So when they attacked the relationship of women, it was specifically to make the women stay home and birth more wage workers. And there's a long history of this. So that happened way back when. Then the witch hunts happened, which further took women away from their medicine, took women away from birthing practices, made crones out to be witches instead of allies of young mothers, instead of medicine people who worked with plants, who worked with the earth. This was when colonialism took old Europe, and there was so much oppression within that because of the feudal system, because of early capitalism, and it was the oppressed people in old Europe that then ended up in the Americas, causing the oppression. So these were really traumatized ass, pained, stripped of their own earth remembrance people who were coming to the Americas to then do that, to the African and indigenous populations. Okay, so it went further. So then there were propaganda against Black and indigenous medicines, plus colonial violence, and then midwives as witches. Timelines you can look up. I'm offering the big picture. So fast forward, there is the twilight sleep era, or Freiberg method, beginning in 1903, used widely in the United States until 1960. Twilight birth was basically this long period of time, about 50 years, where white men, started by Freiberg, like this German man, thought that it'd be a great idea to drug up a woman and for her not to feel any pain or to remember birth. And then the propaganda made it so that it became kind of a feminist thing. And they're like, oh, if we don't have to remember, and a lot with white women, and they would just get pretty much conked out. Now, there's stories of a lot of these meds causing super duper intense birth defects, as well as women remembering decades later the trauma during birth, but because they wouldn't necessarily be unconscious during it, it would just cause an amnesiatic effect afterwards. They would chain these women up to their beds while they were giving birth. And they would like bang their heads on walls and like flash and flail and thrash everywhere. It was really violent and really ugly. And because they couldn't remember, I haven't actually researched this specifically, but I wouldn't put it past anybody with a knife to do all kinds of things that were not consensual while these women were out. Okay, I know from a personal anecdotal standpoint, my grandmother, my mother's mother, who is indigenous, and indigenous presenting, had a lot of trauma from her 3 births in the medical industrial complex, and a lot of dissociative things, as well as not being able to breastfeed her 3 children, and that was in the 50s. So there's that. I'm sure many of you, if you ask your grandparents if they can remember, there was a lot of disembodied, non-consensual stuff going on during their times as birthers in these facilities. Okay. So then in the Freudian era, there was white women and drugs. There's this whole thing where if you were a noble person, that you wouldn't eat. You wouldn't eat a whole lot. So you would, like, these women were just like sitting in their pristine little houses and eating sugar, and not eating like actual food. And then there was like experimental drugs happening to try to sedate them. This is the hysteria. So I have a personal connective I don't want to say creation, connecting the dots in my my field as a healthcare practitioner, as a seer, as a channel, and as somebody who works in the birthing realm, and as a Chinese medicine doctor who knows the symptomology that happens after having lost a lot of blood and qi, these blood deficient symptoms, disconnection from heart and womb causing hysteria. So hysteria, the root word comes from womb. So people with wombs getting hysterical or out off the knocker, but actually it coming from us not having our connection to our ancestral birthing practices, our ancestral birthing communities, our ancestral birthing ceremonies, and the ancestral foods, and trying to fit into this really skewed, really weird white supremacist regime ideal of not working, not having any purpose other than sitting in a house and looking pretty and raising babies who you don't breastfeed. So that there's a bunch of other stuff underlying that we could look into and process through. But I just want to bring that to attention of the era of not being embodied at all, especially as a white woman, without purpose, not even the purpose of feeding your own children. So within that, there was extractivism, go figure, from black and brown women to do all of the work of a white woman, and the disembodiment and disassociation that takes from white women and the torturous nature and trauma of taking Black and brown women away from their families and their children, etc. Okay. So this severe disassociation leading to all kinds of mental health issues and sudden infant death syndrome and crib death amongst lots of babies. So then we further go into the war on womb holders and chest feedings. We talked about the medieval times. World War II, what happened was they sent all the men, so many of the men to war, right? And they didn't have any wage workers. Here we are back again with capitalism. So they didn't have any wage workers. This is when there was a strong push for formula. It started happening earlier than that. Because the formula, people wanted to make money, so they actually paid nurses, people in hospitals, to indoctrinate women to think that breasts were dirty, that breastfeeding was uncivilized, wasn't the modern thing to do. And here is this new formula that was scientific and classier. So they paid hospitals and nurses in hospitals to be specific formula pushing nurses onto people, and many hospitals actually still implement those strategies today, even though a lot of women are like, what? And the reason they did that was so that the women weren't stuck at home breastfeeding, right? Don't be stuck at home. You can do anything a man can do. That's when Rosie the Riveter became super popular, and that's when women became workers for wages, to push into their value system the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy and keep the 1% in power and profit. So all of this propaganda really at its root is capitalistic, taking us away from our babies, our women's work, which is noble, which is beautiful, which is connected, which is magical, which is miraculous, in my feeling, opinion, understand. It's also very hard. It's very hard work. It's very noble work. I'm still breastfeeding, and some days I'm like, but when my son gets sick and literally all he has is a fever for 8 hours and breast milk, and then he's fine, it's worth it. And the bond is worth it, as we'll talk about in the next slide, the next document. Okay, so this is the most intense one. How the definition of health inequities is actually historical erasure of colonialism, slavery, and genocide in perpetuity. So I know as we've gone through this, you've heard me, you've understood my context. We've talked a lot about these things, but literally to spell it out for you, what colonialism did to all indigenous peoples all around the world because of the need for capitalism, wage workers, and industry, right? Capitalism, industry, connection, prison industrial complex, medical industrial complex, military industrial complex, took away there is no more village, no more support systems, no more intergenerational connections, no more grandparents with grandbabies, no more ritual and ceremony, connection to the sacred, the time, the seasons, the energies, each other, for important things, for summer, for winter, for birth, for death, for Dia de los Muertos, for Beltane, for all of these rituals were taken away in lieu of needing to have a 9-to-5 job for a rich man. Okay, no dancing. These dancers had purposes of stewarding energy, of rain, of wind, of deer, of hunt, okay? Meaning taking away from our body, our blood, our organs, our movement, our ability to detoxify ourselves, disintoxicate, like take away our toxicity by sweating, our ability to be in tune with our bodies at all and realize a rote movement in a factory is not good for you, okay? Because you're not like embodied, taking your mind out of your body as opposed to absolving your mind in your movement. That's something colonialism took from us. Singing. connected to our truth, our voice, vibration, movement on a subtle level in our DNA, connection to our ancestors, connection to our cultures, okay? Storytelling, oral histories, morals, historical context are superpowers as humans, as cultures, as specific groups with specific histories, strengths. Okay, taking away our stories, so we have no connection to our past. And if we don't have connection to our past, how do we have connection to our future narratives? Our elders, take away from our elders, from our parents, from our grandparents. So we lack support, respect. We lack respect for death rituals with love and our ancestral connection. So nowadays, even we just throw our elders away, right? Our elders are problematic AF because they suffered from this even more. There's not this communal connection anymore. Housing. We are the only species on the planet who has to pay rent on stolen land. This is unjust. This is ridiculous. This is the definition of capitalism and extractivism from white supremacy is taking land. And I want to say it's not even just white supremacy. All over the world, there are these rich motherfuckers who think they own everything because they did it by violence and force. And here we are in a rat race, not being able to take care of our babies, not being able to have joy, not being able to be connected to the work of our hands because we have to pay rent. We have to pay mortgages on land that was never supposed to belong to anyone ever. We all were supposed to steward the land and live with the land, and the land took care of us and we took care of the land. But that's not what is happening in the age of industry. Food took away our earth-based, natural, ancestral, regional, and full of life essence food because they took away the land. So we no longer know what grows naturally, what grows around us, how to steward it, what to give it. We can't identify it. Don't understand its seasonality. Connection with the land, meaning in place. Once again, our ancestral stories, our seasons, the skies, the cosmos, which holds so much wisdom for the cosmology of all indigenous peoples, of all peoples. The spirit of place, so connecting to the spirit of what's around you, understanding when it's time to move on, when the seasons change, what the animals need with the season change, like just connection in general. Spirit of place, the seasonal rhythms, like the rhythm of time. And so on and so forth, etc., 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 etc. Colonialism has taken us from us. Okay, it's taken us from us. And instead of connecting to us ourselves, being able to feed ourselves in our community, being able to connect and sing to ourselves in our community and dance with ourselves in our community and pray with ourselves in our community, we can sure as hell go buy that new Gucci bag, you know, to fill the void. We can go watch that porn to fill the void, like it, and no judgment. Like, we're all under this. This is everyone because of capitalism. So all of this leads to intergenerational spiritual illness and lack of access to healthful birthing living conditions, to healthful dying conditions, to healthful conditions. This is centuries, generations and generations of disassociation from self and ancestral understanding, disassociation from earth and natural sustenance, disassociation from our spirits and our minds, and the work of our hands and our joy. Plus all of the torturous history and continued reality perpetuating fear, anger, grief, and general trauma. So in our bodies is living all of this, okay? So then there's continued infiltration of unhealthy AF capitalistic cultural norms that keep us away from self-connection and connection in general. So lack of support. We don't have communities because everybody's on this individualistic nuclear family thing. So new parents, especially single birthers, single moms, are left without support, left without good food, causing prolapse, etc., and health problems because they don't get their cuarentena. They're like rest and restoration time postpartum. There's nobody bringing us food. They're working because they can't afford to feed kids without working because of all the stuff we've already named. No healthful community. The communities are broken because of post-traumatic slavery disorder, post-traumatic genocide disorder, post-traumatic war, PTSD, battle disorder, because they send all of our young men to fight oil wars, and kill people, kill brown people, kill melanated people overseas for the rich, and under some guise of freedom, which we don't even really have. The necessity to work for survival, once again, self-disassociation, which can lead to neglect, the self and the children, drug addiction, filling the void, once again, and the drugs have been insidiously put in communities of color by the CIA. Again, you can look all this up, I'm not trying to convince you, I'm just giving you my perspective. Obesity from sugar, diabetes from chemical non-foods and sugar, in perpetuity by the medical industrial complex that gives you medicine that just keeps you addicted and stuck on the medicine, because for like heart disease and diabetes, what the medicine actually is doing is replacing your body's natural system, so your body forgets how to do what it's supposed to do, so you're supposed to stay on this shit forever, which is part of the plan. It's a disease maintenance plan, and then we're paying them to keep us ill on these medications when our bodies literally stop working, because we have allowed, well, no, we didn't allow, we've been fucking, we got fucked. We've been fucked, everyone. All of us. All of us. All of us. But we don't believe it. Leading to lack of being able to breastfeed, and not having any energy left because you're sucked dry from the colonial capitalist patriarchy, stealing your labor for their profit, making you pay rent from stolen land, and you don't have the energy or space to be the nurturer you were meant to be, because you are not being nurtured because of all the stuff we just named. It's circuitous, it's insidious, it's unjust, it is exactly why we are here to undo. Okay? We are the solution. Birth work is social justice work. Birth work is the first ceremony. Birth is the first ceremony for everyone. So even though we have been traumatized, our ancestors have been traumatized, when we reclaim the birthing portal, we are showing our newcomers, our babies, our tiny ancestors, what it looks like to be treated well, what it looks like to be sung to when coming into the world, what it feels like when your birther is well supported and loved by community. We are taking back our ceremonies, which is taking back our bodies, which means we're taking back our futures. Okay? As we said in the postpartum, who's your mama? Right? My Southwest, northern New Mexico indigenous ancestors would introduce corn to the baby. And corn is part of our cosmology. We believe we come from corn. The different peoples come from the different colors of corn. Corn is sacred. Corn is our nurturance. There's the corn mother. One of my son's names, the corn, the deity of corn. Corn is has reverence. It's given reverence to. And in Mexica tradition, it's the tierra, it's the earth, right? This is your mother. You steward this. You love this. Nowadays in the industry, the mother becomes the abuser of being pricked and prodded and taken and like literally take you away from your nurturer, your birther, under creating an underlying belief and imprint of the industry of the little plastic box, or maybe later the prison cell, or the classroom desk, or the cubicle, being your mother, being your place of nurturance that isn't actually nurturing you, but that's what you've been shown, that's what you've been taught. So when we take back our birth and give ourselves permission to re-indigenize, to rehumanize our birth, we are actually creating our children's futures, our descendants' futures, differently than what the colonial capitalist patriarchy has given us. It is very intentional and is necessary. Reclaiming our rest, reclaiming our ancestral foods, and reclaiming our thriving. So this, I'm gonna put in another huge plug for becoming a birth doula, a midwife, and especially a postpartum healer. Because this is where we show ourselves that we deserve to be nourished, that we deserve to thrive, that we deserve rest, that we aren't just worth a paycheck. Okay, this is where we are able to hold space for a community, for new life, for food, for ancestral foods. So you have in your resource sheet the 2 indigenous sources of teaching postpartum healing that I know, plus a Moroccan source. But even if you can, whatever you can do to uphold a birthing parent in sacred community is literally saving humanity. Literally saving humanity by showing energetically showing our children what it is like to be well loved and well nourished and well taken care of and seen and offered to, the way a thriving community was offered to, and reciprocated within before capitalism. Reclaiming sacred community. There you go. It's an incessant reciprocity between humans and spirit and land, always, and animals. We are all in divine connection and weaving with one another, what the Mexica call nipantla, this consistent weaving instead of a consistent disassociation. And this is what it is. We are literally, as human beings, in a birthing portal, whether it's pre, peri, actual birth, and postpartum, we are literally reclaiming ourselves as sacred over the white supremacist Christian capitalist patriarchy. And that takes work, and it's going to take a while. But every single one of us who commits to doing this work is a drop in the reconnection of human to earth, of human to sacred, of humans to each other, so that we stop being ruled by this industrial fear-mongering, by this industrial capitalistic greed. And there's so much more I could say. But I need you all to recognize this work, this birth work, as the first step in the future, in the rest of our lives, and how pivotal it is for us to honor this space in the way our ancestors once did before capitalism, so that we can return the sanctity of life for all. No pressure. Oh, it's so sad. But I'm also so hopeful with all of you. So thank you for traveling with me. Thank you for listening to the call. Thank you for coming to your medicine. Thank you for honoring your medicine and honoring your bodies and honoring the bodies of the people you serve and the babies of the people you serve. And I honor you. Omete.
Wait on Nancy, wait on Nancy.